So what I really wanted to do was actually take you through a few case studies in terms of how the data being generated through digital systems is driving AI and insights, which leads people to actually make better business decisions. And there are examples from supply chain, from finance, from marketing, and quite a few different areas. So you get a real feel of how digital and AI can actually help as you go about running your business. So I think at the heart of it, it's all about sensing something which is already happening. So this could be your sales numbers for the last quarter, and then based on that, you also want to be able to predict in terms of what's going to happen in the future. So if you have, for instance, if you're a telco, and for the past few months you've been tracking every day how many new handsets are being signed up for, how much are you spending on media, etc. Using all that data and then training it on historical patterns, you can actually predict if I change my marketing spend by 5–10%, how is it going to impact the number of people who sign up for new plans. And that's something which all telcos in Singapore are already doing. So one dimension is sensing what's happening in the past and then using that to be able to predict what's going to happen in the future. And then the thing is also being to play different scenarios and optimize your decisions, and then I'm empowering that through various apps which are easy to use, because sometimes data can be quite complicated. Machine learning is like a back-end thing, but how do you give that to a marketing manager and give them like a simple tool where they can play out different scenarios and then help them sort of take those decisions. And digital is at the heart of it. I think if you look back many years, we used to have phones and you had to dial a number, and then you move to punching numbers in, and then now you can just touch. So in those days you couldn't even do redial because there was no way of storing the numbers that you were dialing. It's a mechanical system, and a simple change like having memory inside a phone. Now we're taking pictures, we're uploading it on the internet. The business model has actually now changed, because it's actually not the telcos who make a lot of money from providing connectivity. It's storage. So if you're an Apple user, then Apple is now making money because you run out of space on your phone and you have to subscribe to iCloud and you're storing pictures there. So the model has changed, and when digital happens, that's what you need to do. You need to evolve and then see where do you actually make money from. So as CFOs, I think money is important. I mean, digital is not just for the sake of digital, but how do you actually make money out of it? That's the whole point. And if you look at GE, so aircraft data, there are some thousands of sensors in a aircraft engine. They're all generating data. And what now we're doing is using that data to actually see whether something is going wrong with the engine. When do you need to do maintenance of the aircraft to reduce downtime or improve safety? But at the same time, also don't over-maintain, because if you have a car, there will be a manual from the OEM which basically says, hey, every 5,000 miles you need to change oil, etc., or tires. But depending on your usage, how the operating environment is, if it's a dusty road, you're traveling a lot, it's very hot, the maintenance may need to be a little bit different. It can be more, it can be less. So using analytics to actually figure out what is a customized maintenance plan, and that's one example of how you're going from capturing just data because the systems are digital, but then to taking actions which can help you lower cost and also improve safety. Not drain through this slide, but I think a lot of times we do talk about the impact of analytics, and analytics is great. But what we did was we actually asked some C-suite people around the world in terms of actual financial numbers, in terms of if you have a leading analytics capability, what is the impact on the bottom line? So we collected this data. So there's a sort of a very strong correlation between companies who have built teams who are effectively partnering with their business counterparts to drive change and the financial implications. For instance, in terms of revenue, so we classified as leading. So leading companies are the ones whose analytics strategy is tied with the business strategy, but at the same time they have also developed the ability to execute on those strategies. So if you look there, basically revenue growth is way higher than companies who have not actually built these analytics capabilities. Same thing with operating margin, and same thing with managing risk. And later on today, I mean, the subsequent speakers will also talk about how analytics can be used to also protect your organization, because sometimes we mostly focus on the revenue side, the top line side, or taking out cost, which is fine. But there's another element of protecting your business, which could be from cyber threats. It could be from insider fraud or external. So there's a lot of applications where you're not only growing and optimizing your business, but you also need to protect your business where analytics can help. So later on, we'll talk a bit about that. The other thing to remember is whenever you look at this chart is probably not new, but I think the one thing to look at is that the thinking process has to start from right to left and not left to right. Because a lot of times when you work with your analytics team, they may start by saying, hey, what data do you have? And when they look at the data and then they said, hey, what analysis and what actions? But actually it should be the other way around. Basically starting with the business problems first and then working backwards in terms of, okay, if my hypothesis is that sales goes up because of this, then do I have data to sort of verify that? And then can I build a model for that? So that's the key thing, not be restricted by the data, but come up with the right business questions first, and then work backwards into what you need to do to answer those questions. Now I will get into a few case studies. I selected a few quite carefully. So one is still revenue driven, which is about a real estate company here in Singapore, and how they use the concept of customer lifetime value to give very differentiated experience to the shoppers who come into their malls or people who stay in service apartment. The other one is collections, so heavy equipment manufacturer in Indonesia, and how they improve their receivables and NPLs by using analytics. Second one is inventory, demand supply planning using analytics. Procurement, again a big defense contractor in Singapore with at least a $7 billion spend every year, and how they were able to take $50–60 million out from procurement by using analytics. And the last one is around logistics. So if you have a huge distribution network with distribution centers, warehouses, how do you actually optimize that in terms of location and capacity so that you deliver the right experience, shorten your lead times, but then also lower the cost of logistics. So those are the different examples, and all of them have very clear line of sight into the business impact from a dollar point of view. So let's start. So this one is, it's a real estate developer. They have service apartments. They have malls, car park, commercial, residential. They have quite a bit. But their hypothesis was that actually they can make a lot more money if they were able to synergize data from their different businesses. So if you were going into a mall, I won't name the mall, otherwise you'll be able to guess who it is. But if you're going into a mall and then you're shopping, say, for winter clothes in November, then they want to be able to use that data to see, hey, maybe I think these guys may be interested in going to Japan, and then they send a promotion for a service apartment or a hotel in that area. And they also wanted to be able to recognize that as soon as you walk in, are you a person who's just there to just grab a meal and spend maybe $50, or you're really a high flyer, you're here to shop, and you will spend $10,000 on a watch, and how do you build that and then tailor that experience in real time? So it's a combination of facial recognition as you walk in. It's a combination of your loyalty card data if you have one, and building all of that, and then building very advanced models in terms of what your future transactions gonna be like. And all transactions are not equal. So some transactions have lower margin, some have higher margin. Then you also take into account the cost of serving that customer. So there was a financial formula which they had in terms of calculating margin down to a particular customer. What we did from an analytics point of view, we you do discounted cash flow, right? You try to do NPV. We do it for all projects, all valuation, but we started doing this for each customer. So based on your transactions so far, how many times you visited a mall, whether you have seasons car parking in one of their places, based on your travel patterns, we then start predicting, what's your future transactions, and then what's the margin based on that transaction. And if you call the call center too many times, actually we take that cost into account, so we can actually know how profitable you are, and then we discount it back. And then based on that, they were able to tier their whole population into different segments. So there's a platinum tier, gold, blah, blah, blah. but then now they're able to treat their customers quite differentially. I will share another anecdote from one of the telcos here. This was 5-6 years back. We were doing a project where we were trying to recontract people on a cable broadband. And generally, the recontract incentives were always based on which plan you are on. So if you're on, say, 100 Mbps and you're paying $50 a month, you will get $300, $400 recontract voucher. But then when we looked, so they always had this ARPU, revenue per user metric to decide on what the incentive should be. But when we start digging down, there were a lot of these people who were downloading GBs and GBs of movies, songs, etc. And the telco was actually losing money on those customers from a profit point of view. So they were losing money, but they were still giving them recontract vouchers. So as soon as we switched to this profit view, it was quite clear that here are some customers actually, even they may be paying us $100 a month, but we should just let them be. Let's not recontract. If they want to go somewhere else, that's fine. The second example. So this is, heavy equipment, tractors, earth movers, they do all of that. Indonesia, so huge area, and when something breaks down, they send their service engineers, and a lot of times in these locations, it works on credit. Now the issue was, the new customers, they may disappear, they may take your equipment, so the non-performing assets were actually quite a bit, and they operated on credit. So this whole project actually started from finance transformation. The point was their receivables were too high. They wanted to reduce their working capital. And one of the initiatives they did was, hey, we need to do two things. One, when we onboard new customers, we want to be sure they have decent credit rating with respect to us. Second, if we are providing them services or equipment on credit, I need to know what the risk is so that I can change my terms a little bit. And then also when I'm doing my collections in terms of sending somebody knocking on their door to collect, I should be able to prioritize. And at the same time, I don't want to have the same treatment for everybody because some may be really good customers and they may have forgotten to pay, etc. But then I don't want to chase them down. So by using analytics, basically we using a lot of variables, past 5-6 years data, other information from the business registry, we were basically able to predict in each customer segment who are the high-risk customers and have a very differentiated collection process for them. And by doing that, they were able to reduce sort of 10-15% of their receivables. Yes, so this one is actually also from Indonesia, and they're big palm oil manufacturer. Their issue was, at times, they would over-forecast, as in demand, and they would produce a lot, and they will be with a lot of inventory. They would then run out of tanks to actually put that oil in. And when you run out of space, then you have to sell it at a very low price. That was one scenario. The second scenario was demand goes up, and they don't have stock. Maybe Unilever or somebody calls and says, I need so much, and they don't have stock. Right, so it's a stock out, and they leave money on the table. So they already had a sort of a demand-supply planning process, which they would run annually, monthly, fortnightly, daily, but everything was in Excel, and they would struggle every time the CEO would say, "Hey, can you give me, next month's projections?" So what we did from a machine learning point of view, we put all 10 years data. We built an AI model, and the forecasting which the model created was, actually 95% accurate. And just based on that, they were able to keep more optimal levels of inventory. So this is like an application which we built. So it would basically have each business, region, what materials, type, and for each month, there would be the sales and there would be the forecast. And there would also be an executive override. What that really means is sometimes you don't want to listen to the model, or the model may have only certain data, but you may know something which the system or the machine doesn't know. Like, hey, I always know that client X is going to call on this day, and so you can override it. But it basically gives them a forecast of where the demand is going to come from. Based on that and different rules, then they do plant assignment. So different rules in terms of, hey, this should be sourced from the nearest or wherever, so the different roles, and then it will say, okay, how much should come from which plant and which line. Then it actually gets into something called the oil-fat balance. What that really means is, if you take a milk example, if you have 1 liter of milk at home, you can make butter, you can make cream, you can make skimmed milk. There's a whole lot of things you can do with that raw material. So here, basically, if you have, it's crude palm oil, and crude palm oil, you can refine it, it becomes RD-BPO, or you can take it into olein, stearin. These are different types of fats, and they can be used to make, it goes in Nutella, it goes in ice cream, it goes in a lot of things. So once you have the demand forecast, they have to plan accordingly in terms of what should be my refining, fractionation process, which line should produce what. And then once you simulate that, it then tells them how much of balance will be left. Then this balance of olein or stearin is sent to the traders, and then the traders know, hey, next month we will have extra 100,000 tons of this. Then they start trading on that. Earlier, all of this used to happen very ad hoc. Somebody, the traders will call, the plant guy will say, I am expecting some downtime. Everything was very manual. Now what we've done is we've sort of integrated everything into one digital tool, which has AI and machine learning at the top. And the CEO at any point in time can just log in and then see how his business is running. And if there are any external shocks coming into the system, like, hey, maybe there's a tsunami or something, and then one lane is disrupted, then how do we source from, and they can do all those scenarios now. So just an example where we sort of institutionalize some of the expert knowledge which sits in the logistics and supply chain team and built it into a tool. And it's a really important point because, you know, especially in the supply chain area, people build this knowledge over, you know, decades. But then when people leave, some of this knowledge actually leaves the company. And digital is another way of doing that. How do you not only let the machine learn from your experts? We're not trying to be better than the human. In some cases it is, but also it builds a certain kind of redundancy in there. So if your star guy leaves, all the data is there, all the calculations are there. It's a nice inventory, right? Yes, so spare part optimization inventory was another area where we use analytics. This one is the procurement one. So a lot of times the issue is you get in, so this is the whole procure to pay process. Data comes in, sometimes invoices come in, sometimes it's not clear what's written. You may not have very clean categories that, you know, this one is printing materials, it's this, it's computers, it's IT. So you don't have a very clean taxonomy of how you buy things. So what we did was we actually used text mining, natural language processing, and machine learning to actually first come up with a spend tree, which organizes very nicely how spend should be categorized. But then it started putting descriptions from the invoices. So if it says computer, land, blah, 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 it will pick that up, and then it will start categorizing it very well into distinct categories. Because when you have millions of invoices, it's difficult to do that manually. But once you're able to categorize that, you immediately know if you want to do vendor, like which vendor are you spending the most amount of money? Or if you want to do category analysis, you can say which category am I spending most on? If you want to do vendor fragmentation, you can do that, which basically means if you're buying a lot of computers and IT, and your different divisions in different countries are buying from 10 different vendors, then there's a chance, I mean, you can actually consolidate, get it from one person, and then have better terms. Same thing with the COE. So if you're buying the same material, different places many times, it may make sense to have a COE model set up where that COE specializes in looking for the best deals and the best vendors and do that instead of different countries doing their own procurement. So not rocket science, but typically the challenge is the system is in your ERP, SAP systems. It's millions of transactions. It's very difficult to get that consolidated view. And even if you want to do it manually, it's going to take years to categorize each spend item. But this is where AI sort of does that for you automatically. I think this is the last example. This is, so this is for a company which distributes both Samsung and Apple phones. And they were entering India. And they wanted to do a few things. They basically wanted to have the most optimal distribution network. So it's a function of a few things. One is, where is the demand coming from? Which part of India? Where are your warehouses? What kind of lead time do your clients expect? Because you want to basically place them somewhere or a hub and spoke model, you want to place it somewhere where you can still, it's low cost, but you can still service the demand within 2 days. And you don't want to make that capital investment in setting up those facilities and then see whether it meets the requirements or not. So this is actually, from an analytics point of view, is called network optimization. There are analytics tools which do that. You feed in the historic demand, you feed in a little bit of future demand, you feed in logistics costs, transportation costs, travel times, etc., and then it tells you what's the best model, hub and spoke, distributed, whatever that is. You can play different scenarios, and you can even put in things like, what is the cost of setting up a warehouse in this location. You do all of that, and it will tell you for this particular lead time, this is the network, and this is how much you would need to spend. So it's quite a powerful tool. And the other thing which we do along with it is, because there's GST, there are tax implications, you actually, we work with the tax experts to actually put the tax information here, so your supply chain network is completely optimized, not just from cost perspective, but also tax perspective. So this example is actually from, I'll say it actually because we have permission. This is CapitaLand. So we made this business case for them, which is around what are the different things which you can do, which is on the left side, like single view of customer, segmentation, propensity modeling. And then what helps drive business value. So by using that can be cross-sell or upsell more. It's like, if you're going in and you're going to Starbucks, they can push you another promotion for ice cream or something, right? So we have that data. Loyalty, retention, customer experience, security, building management systems, reducing your utility bills. So there were a whole lot of use cases. And it's a good idea to always start with the business case, like what is the size of the price? Because a lot of times when you talk about digital and analytics, it becomes a very technical discussion. And your teams will get very excited with very complicated things because they want to do cool things. But it's important to bring them back to where the business value is coming from. So this is what we did. It's a journey. This is not generic. It's just for them. That's what they decided to do. They said, hey, actually, we can build an analytics tools ourselves, or we can get I2R. But the real challenge is our data is sitting in different places. It's not clean. And I don't want to waste my precious data science time cleaning up the data. So can you actually help us build a data foundation first? Build us a single view of customer. Because analytics will keep evolving. Today we're doing marketing, tomorrow we'll do supply chains, then we will do pricing, we'll do a whole lot of things. But the biggest deterrent is actually a clean data set. So that's what they started with. And then they raised the bar in terms of different models. Now they're getting into sort of how do you change the game. It's a journey. They built this platform. The platform basically takes in structured data, unstructured data. Then on the right side, and actually that's where it is good, like the marketing team, what can they do in terms of analytics? From finance, spend optimization, procurement, fraud, risk, operations. So this from the investment side, at what price should they buy land when they are bidding? Now they're using game theory to basically figure out how their other competitors will bid. What should their bid be? They're trying to use telco data to figure out what are the demographic patterns in a particular location. Then using sort of time series analysis to say, hey, 5 years from now, what will be the price in that area? So all of this is very cool, very grounded in business kind of ideas. I'll skip through this. So last words. It's good to start with a strategy and a roadmap. And what I mean is a lot of companies jump straight into, hey, let's buy a system, and they throw out an RFP and start doing that. But the better way to do it is actually start with a business workshop. You get everybody in. You come up with the ideas in terms of what are the top 10 business questions that we need to answer this year. And then you work backwards, the same chart, which is around, what are the business questions. To do that, what kind of analysis I need and what kind of data I need. Once you have the list of use cases, then you work into start into pilots. Because some of these analytics pilots take 4-6 weeks. It doesn't take a long time. And once those are successful, then you decide which ones you want to scale up. Then you actually get into the building up a more scalable platform. I think the key thing is, earlier, till I think a few years back, I used to get invited to talks or to client meetings and have an analytics discussion. And it stayed an analytics discussion. And now, and same with Jonathan, now people used to have digital conversations. But right now, most of the conversations are actually quite intertwined. It's more like a digital powered by analytics discussion, because on two sides. One is Digital helps with the sort of end goal, what the innovation is, what disruption we need to do, which helps feed into your business strategy. Analytics is the execution side and the insights, but the last mile is actually, okay, I have the insights, I know what's happening, is the decision making. So, and then decision making is not, just once off, once a month, it's every day, it could even be every hour. Like if you're Amazon, your models are running and you're making decisions every few minutes, right? So how do you embed that insights into a very easy to use operational system which is embedded into your day-to-day process? So that's what we did for our client, right? The demand and supply planners. We had to use digital capabilities to basically bring the AI which was sitting at the back into a very simple mobile app so that when they're traveling, when they're stuck in traffic in Jakarta, they are doing their work. The AI system is giving some recommendations that, hey, you should adjust your stock plan by this. And they say, okay, yes, let's do it. So that's where it is. I think that's why we said, analytics by itself doesn't have any meaning unless you're a researcher. You have to bring it back to the business to solve the right questions. And then most importantly, it needs to lead to some action. It cannot be just keep analyzing but not take an action. All right, thank you for your time.